This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include one of our favorite journalists, Cash Michaels with the Wilmington Journal and the Carolinian, Chris Fitzsimon with NC Policy Watch, Syndicated columnist and soon-to-be-released author again, John Hood, and former Supreme Court Justice Bob Orr. Well, this week's show, we're going to talk about the deal made on state spending that could pave the way for a budget. We'll feature a discussion about the state taking financial control of Halifax County schools and whether a plan by a Mecklenburg County legislator to allow failing schools to be taken over by charter schools is worth considering. Plus, we're going to talk about new UNC revelations about athletic improprieties. Let's get started. Well, we got word on Tuesday that the governor, the Senate, and the House had come to an agreement to spend $21.7 billion in next year's state budget. Well, actually, it's this year's state budget because it was supposed to start July 1. While all sides said it was a compromise, the plan is $200 million more than the governor had proposed, $260 million than the Senate budget, but $420 million less than what the House had passed, and it allows the legislators to get down to the nitty-gritty details about how to spend the money. John, unfortunately, we live in a time when everybody wants to pick winners and losers in every facet, so the question here has got to be asked, who won this spending standoff, and was there a loser?
Well, in the short run, the obvious winners would be the Senate and Governor McCrory, because the number that was selected is closer to where they started than to where the House started. But keep in mind, this is an ongoing process, and everybody can do the math. Everybody can see that the number at 3.1% increase, apparently in growth, which is a little bit lower than a readjusted spending and population target that the legislature came up with, that's closer to the Senate's position, so it looks like the House didn't win. But I assume that because everybody knows that, the House is going to win on some other things, because there's several moving parts. So I think ultimately one of the winners is Governor McCrory, not just because the Senate, the budget number is closer to his original proposal, but because by all accounts he really did play a role in cultivating the two sides, bringing them together and getting a deal made.
Chris, Senator Apodaca said that the governor didn't have any role to play in the Senate budget negotiations, and we learned this week he's been having breakfast meetings with the Speaker and the President Pro Tem. What does that say about the role the governor's played?
Well, we don't know what happened. I mean, he certainly got them together, and he deserves credit for that. I'm not sure what role he played. I guess maybe that'll come out at some point. I still think the decisions were made by Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger and Speaker Moore. You ask about the winners and losers, I think, and we'll see when the final budget comes out, and I think there's still a lot of nitty-gritty. I still think it's unlikely they're going to meet the August 31st continuing resolution deadline, but that's another point. I think the losers here were either state employees and or teachers, because it seems very unlikely that they're going to be able to give there's never going to be big, give across the board pay raise to all teachers and state employees and do the other things that the House and Senate leadership want to do. I think by limiting the spending, this will be another year that public employees will not get a significant raise.
The Senate, Cash said that they were going to take all the policy items out of the budget so that we could pave the way for resolution to it. Are they now going to be debating a spending plan that doesn't have these policy issues? As a journalist, have you got a lot of faith in that?
No, but obviously what was holding everything up were these ideological differences over these policy differences, and so by separating them and making them separate bills, then it makes things easier, and it takes those debates away from holding up the budget process. I certainly agree with Chris that the losers in this, for sure, are state employees and teachers, because that means then that the $400 and something million now that has been extracted from what the House originally passed as a budget, that was money that Nelson Dollars says might have gone to
well,
for raises.
Senator Harry Brown said as much this week. He said that there's no question about that the biggest differences between the House and the Senate would come over education spending. So, Bob, from what you can figure out over this, does that mean what can we expect about teachers' assistants, teacher pay increases, voucher spending, universities, community colleges? I mean, where is that going to come? If Cash is correct and the difference is going to come out of education, who's going to take the hit?
Well, at least from the reports I read today, it will be teacher assistants and state employee raises will be lower than anticipated, and those will be the primary losers. Now, the resolution of the final budget is done inside closed doors, and so who knows what kind of horse trading and
what gets left on the floor.
That's right. And so, but I think as a practical matter, they're all in agreement that teachers, assistants, and state
John,
employees.
back to Chris's point. He says he still doesn't think that it's possible that we're going to get a finalized, passed version of a budget by August 31st. What are the big issues holding them up?
Well, they do have to work out the details on compensation. And keep in mind, teachers and state employees will get some raises. Some teachers will get significant raises. But as you were talking about, across the board raises of significant nature might be the thing that doesn't get enacted. There are some other differences of opinion. They have to do with Medicaid. They have to do with higher education, a variety of other areas where there's economic development spending, which is quite different between the House and the Senate. I think it's at least conceivable they can get to a deal by the end of the month. We'll have to see.
There's also, they took the big policies out. They took out Medicaid, we've talked about. They took out the sales tax redistribution. That's in a bill with economic incentives, which may hold up the session but won't hold up the budget. But there's probably, I bet there's 20 or 30 from small to medium policy decisions in the Senate budget that nobody's talking about. And I think those will be, open records laws, lottery advertising revenue, all sorts of things that nobody's even talking about yet. Any one of those could hold up the budget for a day or two or three, and that would, I think, jeopardize them finishing by the end of the month.
We've seen in past years that the small things could be
There's always something that comes up.
Yeah. Well, we thank you for watching NC Spin on the air and on YouTube. There's a reminder that there's much more on our website, ncspin.com, or NCSpin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and our weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com or NCSpin on Facebook or on Twitter at NCSpinTweets. After these messages, we're going to talk about the state taking over Halifax County schools.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
Clean transportation options can help you fuel what matters.
We're fueling what matters to us by converting our fleet of collection trucks over to compressed natural gas. It's a good, smart business decision, and having the air cleaner is something that benefits all the families that work with us.
We use biodiesel in our heavy equipment. We've got propane in a lot of our police cars, and we've really embraced the electric car. Join the city of Raleigh and fuel what matters.
To learn how you can fuel what matters, visit fuelwhatmatters.org.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
We now return to NC Spin.
In 2009, Judge Howdy Manning used Halifax County schools as a prime example of a school system that was not providing the sound basic education our Constitution requires. He called it academic genocide, and he urged the state to step in. Well, the State Board of Education sent experts to the system to provide help, but Halifax schools continued to produce unsatisfactory results. Now, Bill Kobe, the chair of the State Board of Education, is taking control of the budget process. Kobe said it's clear that the HCS board and leadership are unable or unwilling to make sound financial decisions in order to sustain a financially viable school district. To our dismay, irresponsible decisions by the HCS board signal a failure to cooperate with the recommendation by the SBE's designees. Representative Rob Bryan, in the meantime, is introducing a plan for failing schools to be taken over by more successful charter schools. Cash Michael, money isn't the problem in this issue, we're told. Halifax is spending more per student than the state average. So what's your understanding of the problem, and why does the State Board of Education believe it can help these schools?
Well, we've seen this train wreck before, where you have what is supposed to be a board that develops policy get into micromanaging. And as a result, we have, I read Colby's letter, the chairman's letter, and it's, if those things are true, it is ridiculous what these board members think they can get away with. As a result, they have no results to show for their aberrant behavior, so there's no question the state had to step in. No one likes that when the state steps in to take care of local business, but in this case it seems to be necessary. The attitude of the board members, though per my research it seems that the board chair and the superintendent are excluded from that. They want to work with the state. They want to see excellence, but the rest of the board for some reason feels they are entitled to run things the way they want. But the children are suffering, and so something has to be done.
No question about that. John, help us understand the difference here. The state says they're taking control of finances, not necessarily of instruction and operations.
Right.
What does this mean?
Well, it primarily means the state, at least directly, is not going to be making personnel decisions or directing employees how to do things other than...
But it said they had to approve them.
Yes, but if you're focusing mostly on the budget, then you're making decisions about allocations, and of course all the state school systems have to follow certain state rules anyway, whether they've been taken over by the state or not. It's not like they have a lot of autonomy about school, about the teaching of material and so forth. They're following a lot of the rules already. This is not the same as has been done in some other states, where the state actually goes in and fires everybody and reconstitutes the school system and hires a superintendent and hires principals. That has happened. And the issue there is sometimes you feel like you have no choice, but education policymakers have looked at these state takeovers around the country, and you know, there's some cases where it seems to work. There are lots of cases where it doesn't seem to work. So that's why doing this carefully is a wise idea.
But Chris, here's the question that I think that I ask, and I suspect many of our viewers might be asking, and that is, Howdy Manning issued this plea in 2009. Of course, these schools have been having problems since long before then. It's been 5 years. Nothing's happened. Why did the State Board of Education wait so long to step in and take over these schools?
I don't know. There have been turnaround people sent there in the past. They've tried different things, but I think one thing the state can do, the state can go in there and do the best they can to make sure the kids are getting the sound basic education they're guaranteed. But when you have people who are making poor decisions who are elected in a county, I think it's very difficult. The thing about money always, I would argue, we don't invest enough in public schools. In this case, as you mentioned, money isn't necessarily the issue. There are people in some school systems that don't spend the money they have wisely, and the state has to figure out a way to help.
Bob, we hear all kinds of explanations for why a lot of schools aren't doing well, and at the end of the day, a lot of it is just explanation. Are we doing enough for failing schools?
Well, I think in the context of doing things for the schools and the operation, particularly in Halifax County, a lot of money and resources have been poured into it. You know, what isn't being addressed is the underlying poverty and long-term issues in Halifax and other counties that exist. Parental involvement, lack of parental involvement. I mean, these are issues that the state cannot easily or readily
and some say it's the state
yeah.
responsibility to start off with. But Chris, back to you. Rob Bryan's proposal. You wrote a scathing response to his proposal that charter schools take over these failing schools. Tell us why.
Well, two things. I object to the idea. I don't agree with the policy, number one, which has been tried in several states and has not succeeded as many of the people believed, especially in Tennessee. But it turns failing schools, which we still don't know which ones are failing, how we're going to pick them and all that, it turns them over converts them into charter schools, in many cases run by for-profit charter operators who can fire the entire staff and can do a lot of other things. But almost as offensive to me is the fact that this hasn't been introduced. This at some point might be dropped the last 2 weeks of the session into a Senate bill. There will be no time for hearings, no time. This is a dramatic change in public education. At the very least, let's do it thoughtfully and have some testimony and some experts talk about it.
Well, a serious question about that proposal would be, would the charter school provide busing? Would they provide lunches for children that
and many
live
of the
in poverty.
charter schools
Yeah,
do.
they're not. They don't. The charter schools don't provide.
All right,
that.
but John, if you don't like Rob Bryan's proposal, and we continue to have failing schools, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot going on, what's your suggestion as to what we should do?
Though I don't agree with bringing it up so late, I am intrigued by Bryan's proposal, which I do think would address you'd have to provide the same services at the public school as a charter school that is current. So that's part of the proposal, as I understand it. But you have to do something. And by the way, you have to try a number of different things. And the assumption that if anybody has the assumption that there is a solution, like a bottle of magical elixir on somebody's shelf, and North Carolina just refuses to go get it, but everybody else does.
So doing nothing is not an option.
Doing nothing is not an option, but furthermore, there isn't just one answer, and we have to try a number of things and see how they work.
So, Cash, do you expect we're going to see more instances where the SBE steps in and starts taking over some of these schools?
Well, the answer is yes. I agree, though, that we do have to try a couple of things, but I think that Judge George is actually absolutely correct if we do not factor in the fact that we're dealing with poverty. High poverty populations and high poverty schools. If you don't factor that in, then you're never going to get the proper answer.
And it's really striking quickly. One of the people who's supporting this behind the scenes has said they're involved. It's an unlikely person, but I'm involved because I want to give these kids these wraparound services and take care of them and their families. Why aren't we doing that already? Why do we have to convert it to a charter school before we figure out a way to help these kids who are obviously struggling?
All right, after these messages, we're going to talk about UNC self-reporting more violations.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
We now return to NC Spin.
UNC Chapel Hill's problems seem to have problems. Just before the university was due to respond to allegations made by the NCAA, they self-reported more violations in women's basketball and men's soccer. Athletic Director Bubba Cunningham said that in conducting investigations so as to respond to the NCAA allegations, more instances of improper academic help and special arrangements for players were found. The information postponed the university's response and means a final decision on the notification of allegations won't likely come until sometime next year. Bob, as an attorney who's been involved in some of these legal cases involving the university and this athletics, what's your reaction to these revelations, and how does it impact the ultimate decision?
Well, it keeps the story going, which is not to UNC's advantage. But in the greater scheme of the NCAA infractions, I don't think these new ones are particularly significant, and I don't think they'll impact the ultimate sanctions, assuming sanctions are imposed. I think it causes greater concerns, particularly the academic context, with the Southern Accreditation Association and the fact that they put UNC on probation.
Yeah.
And it's a story and an issue that's not going away anytime soon, despite the desire of some of our fellow panelists to have that.
Cash is a journalist here. I mean, okay, so they self-reported, but they're saying there were impermissible student help and special privileges, but they didn't tell us what they were. Should the university really get down to the Sunday school gospel truth and tell us what's going on?
Well, the simple answer to that is yes, but that's been the way they've operated ever since this all began. They find out what the problem is. They assess what the damage will be or could be to the school and to its image, whatever price they may have to pay one way or the other.
But it's going to come out sooner or later, one way or the other.
And then they slowly but surely march it out in a way and in a context that all of us will understand and accept.
Chris, this thing was a bit bizarre, I thought. I don't know about you, but the day before, the athletic director met with the university faculty athletics committee. He didn't mention a thing about these new revelations, and the next day they were released to the public. Now, either Cunningham didn't know about them, or he just wasn't being candid with his own faculty athletics committee. What do you think was going on?
Well, we don't know. I hope that he hadn't confirmed them or didn't know about them. He could have sent him a signal. And look, I think this story is going to end at some point at UNC. I don't know when. And then another, but then another major university, whether it's in North Carolina or Alabama or California, is going to have a very similar thing happen. Nothing is going to change until we address the fundamental issue of big money, of athletes being exploited, of the way the NCAA works. This is going to go on and on. We'll be talking about this for as long as Spin is ever on the air until we address the root cause of it. Nobody has the guts to do that.
Yeah, we're all getting old on this show. I mean, we can't do this forever. We got to come to an end of this, John.
I may be overly cynical, and that accusation has been made in the past. But I would like to see some evidence that the NCAA will actually do anything of consequence in this situation or any situation. Will UNC be compelled to give up wins, to give up national championships? Would the accreditation agency ever go beyond probation, which actually doesn't mean anything, and say, you're no longer accredited? Are they going to do that to a school like UNC Chapel Hill? Unless someone has a credible threat of some serious sanction, I think cheating will continue to be rampant in college athletics, and that's just the way it is.
Bob, you're an alum. I just got to ask this question. Does this have anything to do with why UNC decided to extend men's basketball coach Roy Williams' contract and didn't extend Sylvia Hatchell's contract, the women's coach?
Well, I don't think it had anything to do with these new allegations, because whatever they are, they're not going to stack up. Unfortunately, it appears that they want to make women's basketball the scapegoat of this scandal in order to preserve the greater athletic
the money sport. If that's the intention, I don't think it'll work. I suspect it's simply a matter of the fact that men's basketball is a major revenue business. Women's basketball is not. That's all there is to it.
Is there a problem here with discrimination, Cash?
I like him.
All right. After these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out, add your input, and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower-cost, higher-quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law, increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
We now return to NC Spin.
All right, this is the most interesting part of the show. Not that the other hasn't been, but I always enjoy this part of the show when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Chris Fitzsimon, we're going to start with you.
Well, one of the things we've talked about education on this show, people sort of forgotten. Governor McCrory made 2 appointments to the State Board of Education months and months ago. Patty Head, a former chair of the Wake County Board of Education, Todd Chasteen, who works at Samaritan's Purse in Watauga County. Those appointments have not been confirmed by the General Assembly. Whether or not it's a grudge or they're still arguing and they still don't like each other, there was no. This breaks a precedent almost without fail. They usually do this routinely. And it's curious that the General Assembly still hasn't appointed. The State Board continues to meet. The old people are serving. It's time to have the new people get on board.
All right, Cash Michaels, tell us something we don't know.
We are still saddened by the death of a civil rights pioneer, Julian Bond, who was one of the founders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee at Shaw University in Raleigh. Was the chairman of the NAACP board. The producers of the new documentary, Origins of the Dream, had a chance to conduct perhaps maybe Bond's last on-camera interview for the documentary about Dr. King's love of literature. And hopefully that'll be seen when the documentary comes out in about 2 years or so.
Are you one of those producers?
Yes, sir.
Another one in your credit.
Yes, sir.
Congratulations.
Yes, sir.
When is it going to be shown?
Ain't got the faintest idea.
Bob Orr, tell us something we don't know.
Well, this past week, Governor McCrory appointed retired Superior Court Judge Jim Baker to the North Carolina State Board of Elections. A very well-qualified individual. It's interesting, though, that Larry Leak, who was also a Democrat,
right. Former chairman.
Yeah, former chairman of the board of Madison County. So Madison County, which has a great history in elections, both in a positive and negative way, have been amply represented on the state
Liston
board.
Ramsey's former home.
And Zeno Ponder. And
Zeno Ponder.
E.Y. Ponder. And
the motto there was always vote early and vote often.
That's right.
All right. Yeah. John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
Well, most people following politics do know that Congressman Robert Pittenger from the 9th District is in a situation where there's a federal probe into a company that he once owned, having to do with matters unannounced at the moment. His argument is, well, I don't own the company anymore. I sold it to my wife. Well, it turns out there's some discussions in Washington about maybe changing ethics or at least changing ethics advice to get out of this business of thinking that you've recused yourself by selling a company or business interest to your spouse.
Are you trying to say there's no firewall there and that men and
I don't know.
I
know both of them. I assume that they have been following the rules as set out by whoever wrote the rules, but there is a discussion about changing those rules.
So it could be some very interesting bedroom conversation taking place there, or not.
That's the kind of thing you speculate about and I stay out of.
All right, well, very good. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. We hope you'll join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.